Hello, and welcome to another programming video. I wanted to talk about some of the basic concepts of programming that can be a little bit tricky, and just things that you should be aware of. So I'm sort of assuming that you know how to start the program. This is the program we had with making our first program. So while I may not number these exactly, I'll put them in chronological order. But I think one of the first things that if you're going to make a program, a very fundamental thing that you should be aware of is an idea called precedence. So in other words, as we come into our code here, I've written out a few examples to talk about, but right here we have an integer that I'm declaring, and it's called int test, just to give it a name. And I am setting that immediately equal to 3 plus 2 times 8. And let me just do this. The question for precedence here, and what I mean by that, and what it means, I should say, is are we going to do this? 3 plus 2 equals 5 times 8. Like you would think if you just did them in that certain order right here, right, that you would get the answer 3 plus 2 is 5 times 8 is 40. So let's see what happens when we start our program up and hit the button. What answer do we get in here? Hopefully you guys can see that well enough, but int test equals 19. Well, why is that? Because 2 times 8 is 16 plus 3 is 19. In other words, multiplying here, this asterisk symbol, takes precedence over addition. And I'll show you, I have a little chart I got from the internet. And if we look here, the higher up the chart is like the order that the program will evaluate that equation. And multiplicative, the asterisk, is ahead of additive. So this is something that's pretty important to keep in mind because otherwise, in this particular case, it's kind of impossible to do math. But what if you don't want it to do it that way? What if you want it to be 3 plus 2 is 5? What you do is you put parentheses around it. There we go. So now, if we hit continue, we still have 19 because we didn't run through this code again, but we'll hit that. Now we ran through the code and we get the answer of 40, just like I expected. I hope that makes sense. I want to point out something else. While you're in edit mode, you can change quite a few things about the code. So the fact that I stopped debugging has allowed, stopped on one of those debug, stoppers, has allowed me to change that. Like if I came in here now and tried to delete that parentheses, I get this error message saying the code is running, you can't edit anything. But if we do go ahead and hit the button again, we can now change it back to the way it was because it's paused it. And when we restart it, it will save that change and kind of recompile itself. That's not something that this used to do. So moving on to another example here. Let's go ahead. We got that stoppered. I want to ask you the same question. You can kind of see where we might be going with this if you're reading ahead of me. But I'm going to uncomment this, because this, to me, can be really, really confusing. And when you try to write complicated if this or that, you really got to keep this in mind. And there's something that programmers usually do, I'll tell you at the end here. So going back to our precedence question, which one is it going to do first? All right, well, we can kind of tell. So if it's true or true and false. So is it evaluating this first or is it evaluating this first? Well, true or true would be true. But then again, true and false would be false, but this would still be true, so it would go in there. That make sense? So in other words, if it does this one first, the answer would be the same in either way. So like, true and false is false, but since this one is true, it's still true, right? Because either one of these had to be true. But let's come in here and do this. Let's uncomment this one. So now what we're doing by putting our parentheses, if you remember, is we're forcing it to evaluate this one first. Right? Which means we got the same answer, right? In other words, nothing changed. We can still go in there. And so it's basically doing, it seems like what it was doing before. But let me come over here and uncomment out this one. And all of a sudden we get this little warning. And if we get in the right place, oh, it's because it's running, it's not giving us the full tooltip. But what that little warning is telling us is that it will never go in here. As a matter of fact, let's just stop it for a second. I can show you the warning better. Say unreachable code detected. So what that means is when we force this OR to go first, so true or true is going to be equal to true, but then you're saying that false and true, so in other words, the second step of what the computer is going to do is going to look like this. Does that make sense? Because it's, when it evaluated this first, it got the answer true, but then it's saying true and false are not true. So this is sort of proof that it's evaluating the and statement first. Again, I know that's probably confusing. You might have to take time on your own to think about it. One of the things that most programmers end up doing is they end up using these parentheses in their logic test. So, in other words, if they wanted to get whatever result, like whatever they want to have happen first in their logic, they put the parentheses around it. So like instead of worrying about is it true or false, what you should do, and at least at some point come to some comfort level with this, keep in mind that you can always use these parentheses. Now, can I make, let's just say, even using this int test, do we have enough? Maybe we can give it another one just because we might need an extra, maybe we do 3 of them. So let's just do this. We'll get a momentary error there, but we'll just put a 1 after this one and a 2 after that one. And let's see, if we put our parentheses around here, so that's going to give us an answer of 40. By the way, double slashes is a comment, so it won't read anything after those double slashes. You don't have to put this space I just did. And we know this answer is 19. Is there any way we could, we could do, let's just do, there you go, see what I did? So what we can do now is, what's this? So let's talk about precedence here. So it's going to do the multiplying first, right? So 3 times 8 is 24 plus 2. We will get the answer. Oops, wrong one. All right, I don't want to navigate under the caret. This one will give us the answer of 26. So what this would look like a little bit more in a real life scenario, so to speak, is, you might do something like if int test 1 is less than 20. Let me just do something real quick because I want you guys to see what I'm doing maybe a little bit better. So I will comment that out. See how when you use the comment thing up here, it just does the same thing with those 2 slashes. So I'm going to change this back to what it was a second ago, just so we can see that I'm setting up my equation to be right, to be equal. Now let's just use int test 1 here, and we'll say if int test 1 is greater than 30. Right? So this will also be true. But now this last part, we want that to be false. So if int test 2 is less than 26, let's put a space in there so it looks nice, that will be false. Does that make sense? So we're coming up here, we're doing our math, and we're getting the answer 26. Just so you know, and you should get familiar at some point. We'll maybe have another episode, but I think these things are somewhat clear. I don't think it's a overly difficult less than or equal to. So this would be true. This is false because it's not less than 26, it's equal to 26. So at that point, we would go in here. Now, another thing to note, let me come down here and we'll just copy this. Now, remember, this one got you that unreachable error, right? Matter of fact, yeah, let's just get rid of that. And we'll comment this guy out. See, watch, I'll do the same thing. I don't have to hit that button up there if I just put the double slashes. So we want true or true and false, which is really the same thing we're doing, but we want to force it to evaluate this first. So if either one of these are true, give me a true, and if this one is false, give me a false. Well, if you notice now, this is no longer unreachable code because it is possible that this would be less than 26 at some point, right? Matter of fact, if we change this to 27, this would be true and you would go in here. I hope that makes sense. And I hope even if it doesn't make sense, that you're aware of this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because you're going to maybe start writing some code and it's not going to be working out. And what you really need to do, and by the way, this is where hovering over this comes in really handy. So let's go ahead and click that and we'll start the program back up. And we'll hit change label. So, you know, you're going to come in here and then it's not going to be doing what you expected because you wanted to go in there, but it's not. You know, so if I come over here and say int test is 19, great, you can compare it yourself. If you hover right over the symbol, like I'm right over that less than symbol, see how it says true? So you can see what it's evaluating, true. If you come over here, you can see when it evaluates the or, you can actually see that it's coming up with true because, you know, it's going into or into that. Now watch what happens when I come over to here. Notice that because we have the parentheses around it, when I hover over this true, it doesn't show me the int test2 part because that's not part of evaluating this or any longer. Like, in other words, in order to get to the answer true here, it had to go in and evaluate the and first. So that's where you get, you know, that part of it. Now, if I come over to the and, by the way, this evaluates the false, right? Because 26 is not less than, well, int test of 26 is not less than 26. If I evaluate this one, now if I come back over here, you'll see, because we're forcing it with the parentheses, what happens is it has to evaluate what's in the parentheses first, which when we hover here, we're going to find out that it's true. So even though this one's false, the whole answer, well, because this one's false, because we're expecting both of these to be true in order for it to go in, you're getting false. Again, I hope this helps. Trust me when I say that you might be programming for the next 30 years. And I've not been programming quite that long. But years later, you're going to get yourself into a situation where you're going to cause an error in your program. Or maybe not an error per se, but your program's going to do something unexpected. And it's going to be because you messed up this. Or you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be saying, why isn't this doing what I want? You know, it's because you've got this messed up, and you're going to sit there looking at it and it's just going to look like a blank wall when you're trying to figure it out. Like, what in the hell is going on here? Why isn't this working? And like I said, I think you'll find that most programmers end up using parentheses, you know, to try to force this when they're not sure. You know, I've got this all laid out. It's actually relatively simple when you think about what I'm doing here. It's not the most complex thing a computer could do. But, you know, like by forcing this to do this, we now know that that one's going to go first. However, if you're smart or have a good memory or something more than I have some days, You're not going to get confused by what this is going to do. You're going to know, okay, it's going to do and first, and then it's going to do the or second. So this and this is false, but this is true because it's doing the or second. It goes in, as opposed to forcing it to do the opposite. I hope that helps. Like I said, if you don't understand every word, I guess you can play the video back over and over. Maybe it might help to go find some place where you can read about this kind of thing, because obviously it's it's a bit confusing. But it's something that's very important to keep in mind, because again, if we're going to make a video game one day and we want to calculate the person's hit points, if you look, these are all the same numbers, right? I didn't change 8, 3, and 2, but just depending on what the order I put things in, whether I put parentheses, I get pretty much completely different answers. So it's important to understand how the computer works with that, and that you can easily go ahead and change the order that it's doing the things by putting parentheses around certain parts of it. And it'll evaluate what's in the parentheses first. Again, hope it helps. Hope you enjoyed it. Good luck in your programming, and I will see you in the next one.